I will begin this conversation, and a heads up, I'm going to do the first bunch of slides, and then Marc Antoine is going to do the trailing slides, where we kind of get into the bowels of knowledge representation. And so let's go ahead and give me a second. Uh, Share this screen and start the slideshow. And I got to make this small because all the little people. Okay. Um, I'm painting this as one view, but actually that's a lie. It's an aggregated view based on the life experiences that I have been exposed to of many, many people the world over, and some of whom were in this room. And what I want to do first, why does this not work? There it is. Um, I just want to cover the meta level of what I'm up to here. This presentation channels the work of Douglas Engelbart, Ted Nelson, and many others, in particular Doug's work on augmentation. And a key point that I want to make is we seek to augment human capabilities, not replace them. This presentation is far more than my views alone. Marc-Antoine Perron actually contributed to these slides, among other things. We have a focus on worldviews, which you could call beliefs, and their justifications. This is a truth-seeking mission. We don't declare anybody holds truth. We're simply asking people to explain what they know and how they know it. We focus on the networking of ideas, not people. And that's critical because we're trying to build a social network for ideas, not for people. Um, any knowledge work, in our view, should be that of humans and not machines. Now, machines, particularly AI, can have a proper role, but and actually I'll give an example of that later. But I want to go now into a set of scenarios. Now, I copied these scenarios out of a PowerPoint that I gave almost 20 years ago in Dubrovnik at a Knowledge Federation conference. I'm going to talk about Joe as a med school student who's preparing for a test on bacterial infections. And he starts doing his research, and I want to point you to a bottom box that says use garden control code tools to record discoveries. That's because these slides existed when I was talking about knowledge gardening. And if you think about how golf courses pop up around uh, I'm sorry, condos pop up around golf courses, you're going to learn that the golf course is an attractor and the condos are a result of that. They're the behavior that the attractor caused. So we were using garden condos as our mechanism. And so that's all dated, but keep going. So Joe actually finds some papers and he annotates the page with this idea: macrophages use free radicals to kill bacteria, and he puts in a bunch of tags. Now, this will remind you of Delicious, which kind of has its heritage. I'm sorry, in Hypothesis, which has its heritage in Delicious. Um, so these are the processes you can do on the web. And there's another scenario, a woman who's living a healthy lifestyle, and she read that free radicals can cause cancer. So she goes and does more research. And guess what? She makes some more tags, and she points out that antioxidants kill free radicals. Um, and Now you turn to a fellow named Ben, who is a cancer patient with recurring bacterial infections. Ben visits a garden condo to research bacterial infections. And guess what? He stumbles on the topic made by a tag called free radicals. And notice what it coupled. And he says, oh my gosh, what's this all about? So he decides to make a decision. Sounds like I should not take any more antioxidant pills. And so he goes into the garden and he connects those two ideas. Macrophages kill free radicals, use free radicals to kill bacteria, and antioxidants kill. He makes that connection. Now I'm gonna bookmark this tag for a reason. This page for a reason. Ben was me, and I'll explain that later if I remember to. So Olivia is a medical doctor interested in immune subjects, and she goes in the garden and she stumbles on Ben's connection. This is an assertion, um, and she thinks must avoid really doesn't quite convey what's going on, and she needs to restate it. So she goes in and adds some more information to the growing graph. Now, I don't show it here because it would confuse everybody, but she connects the contraindicates claim to the must avoid claim with a coherence relation, same as. And so, in other words, she's created a trail from Ben's idea. Uh, um,
What are you saying?
Traverse here to help. You're going to be in front of the screen. How do I fix this?
Somebody needs to mute. And so she's really growing a knowledge base here. Okay. Now, somebody comes in who's smart enough to challenge the claim, and claims can be challengeable. So, in all cases of, and so what happens is a conversation explodes over that question in all cases. And obviously, you're going to get some people's answers who didn't do their research, and other people who lack the conversational literacy to actually explain their answers. So somebody said no. So somebody had to ask why. And along comes some hosts are not capable of mounting a full response when the antioxidants are present. And guess what? They brought a new term in the conversation: hosts. Somebody says, "Well, a host is a living organism that hosts infections." Well, yep, I get that. But actually, somebody else built on it and said a compromised host is a host that has a weakened immune system. Compromised host actually is short for immunocompromised host. And he gave a link to, to his response. He got his evidence, okay? This is the way conversation should work, in my humble opinion. They don't always do it, but that's what I believe. Now, notice how the graph has grown to a place where it is fully fleshed out, and includes in the background, but not shown here, is a whole conversation behind some of the nodes. Okay. Now I remember I can explain why it was me. In the year 1992, I did not have access to anything like these tools. There was no such things as gardens and condos and tagging systems and annotation systems. But I did build an AI platform that was a discovery system, and I started to teach it about immunoresponses And it would that program, that knowledge base was picked up and finished by Professor Robert Treeley's, then at UCLA Med School. And I just simply went in and asked it, how does my immune system you react to bacterial infection? And I stumbled on a node that it painted called macrophages use free radicals to kill bacteria. And I immediately made the connection. Why? Because I happened to be taking antioxidants and I knew they killed free radicals. And I made the inference that, oh my God, I took it to my physician and I said, hey, did you know this? And he says, well, they don't teach that in med school, but it sure makes sense. So I went down to the UC Davis library and did the research that allowed me to, in my mind, grow the graph you're looking at now. So I began to learn I was an immunocompromised host, and bacterial infection really does contraindicate. So I went off my antioxidants, and the bacterial infection stopped. End of story. Now, here's where we get into the meat of what's going on. Constructivism is in practice. Our scenarios illustrate that. You basically saw people co-constructing a universe of discourse that none of them singly had. Conversations, what can we learn from conversations that are centered on a graphical representation of their thoughts and ideas? Well, graphs mean less knowledge items to hold in your mind. You're just looking at what's important, the full context. Deduplication becomes critical. And this is where topic maps come into the game. And there are other processes to provide deduplication. Open Sherlock happens to be one such platform to do this. It's a project that I'm working on and Marc Antoine is contributing to. Isolating knowledge items can reduce confusion. I think this is the whole point. In any socially constructed knowledge graph, people have uneven training and will propose objects of various quality, clarity, precision, and evidence. You saw that in my scenarios. I want you to compare Ben's contribution to Olivia's. It's just amazing. All right. Graphs provide context, and a full world model kind of graph can connect contexts so that you can get the equivalent of wormholes among people's ideas and thinking. That's critical to facilitating connecting unconnected dots. I'm going to give you an architectural overview. This, I am not telling you how to build the system. I'm telling you what I was thinking as early as 2008 at the first Federation a Knowledge Federation conference at which I met and at which these ideas began to grow. Now, I needed definitely to anchor this in the social. This is not just a technical solution, it is a socio-technical solution. And that diagram on the right is basically the same idea, but it came from a book on cultural algorithms. How do cultures work? And they work like with population spaces that act and think, and then they contribute to a belief space, a community memory, which is constantly updated, and that's how cultures work, and that's how this architecture is supposed to work. Now I've drawn it as a logical diagram, like it's client server. I'm not saying that's how you do it. I'm just saying that's how I do it. um, Now we're going to talk about federation, but first I claim that whoever gives a long talk ought to have at least one photo of an adorable kitten. So the working premise here is no single platform, attractor, user experience can satisfy all participants. This is about cognitive skills, cognitive abilities. I mean, think of Disneyland where you go in and you can turn left and go ride on a boat or go on a jungle cruise or whatever. And you go to the right and you can drive little cars or scare the crap out of yourself by riding in a on a roller coaster that's inside of a dark room. Um, Everybody has their own needs. Now, how do we satisfy that? We suggest it's possible and even desirable to federate all such trustworthy platforms. And whatever kind of attractor basin they use and whatever user experience they implement, we want to unite and organize their emerging worldviews and justifications. What we're after is well justified beliefs, not necessarily truth. People will take from this what they hold to be true on their own. Federation is a boundary object which supports complex adaptive systems and constructivism. That's the link to the educational community. The architectural justification, federation. Look, I got an image of a person jumping over a pond. What I'm trying to say here is this game is not about forcing your beliefs on somebody because there's a yawning gap between what you're saying and what they may believe. What we're asking for is a gentle way to give them a garden path around the yawning path that they can navigate on their own and draw their own conclusions. Whether they reach the other side or not is not for us to say, but it's what this game is about. Federation processes enable sharing and organization of resources. We see Federation servers redundantly connected all over on all continents. Epistemic communities, which we happen to call K-hubs. We called them condos in the past. They're now knowing hubs, are required to establish trust metrics in order to join the Federation. Some will include games and guilds. Not all will. Trust and safety requires strong authentication, even though we don't disallow people coming in with handles and avatars. And in fact, some games require them. Some form of house rules which promote respectful behavior. And this is setting behavioral boundaries and enforcement of those rules to stay in the Federation. Federation of structured conversations allow meaningful trust metrics, which constitute the meta level. Now, I want to go into a couple of key scientific underlying concepts that drive me. Complex adaptive anticipatory systems. That's us. Humans are that. Dave Snowden does a 4-minute YouTube link at the bottom that very delightfully tells you these key points. You want to pay attention to flexible boundaries, which set behavioral limits. You want to define attractors, which enable behavior patterns to emerge, and reward mechanisms to stimulate emergence of beneficial behaviors. Now, the Red Cross here in America, and there's something like that elsewhere, and similar organizations are examples of a swarm behavior around an attractor. Now, certain kinds of games are well documented for stimulating personal growth. World of Warcraft is especially well documented, and it really animates me. I'm giving you a quote from John C. Lee Brown YouTube, which opens with, "I would rather hire a high-level World of Warcraft player than an MBA from Harvard." That's key to my thinking, folks, and you can find that video online at YouTube by Googling that quote. Okay, what is anticipation? All biological creatures are anticipatory, some by means of biochemical processes, some by means of growing models in their environment. And there's deep science behind this. It starts in 1954 with a paper by Nicholas Reshevsky, which invented a new discipline called relational biology. World models are crucial to social networking of ideas rather than humans. What is an expectation failure? It's what happens when your model, whatever you have of the world, fails to predict some outcome. So you're playing a game of chess and your opponent makes a move you've never seen before. That's an expectation failure. For most people, it's called a learning opportunity. And how your platform and how the humans deal with the learning opportunity is what's important. Chaos. Chaos theory studies complex, nonlinear dynamic systems that appear random but are actually deterministic and highly sensitive to initial conditions. Chaos and humans are profoundly linked through chaos theory, which posits that small initial changes in life can result in significant, nonlinear, and unpredictable long term outcomes. Chaos and emergence describe how complex, unpredictable, and ordered systems arise from simple, interacting, and disordered parts. Go back all the way back to our scenarios of simple interacting parts co-creating a graph. That's an emergent property of this thing. I have a confession. This is the only place in these slides where I actually borrowed from Gemini using Google queries. These are things I already knew, but Gemini said it better than I could. A social network of any kind is animated by complex adaptive systems, full stop. Chaos theory allows us to think about the nature of emergent behaviors and outcomes. Constructivism. Individuals learn and build models through experience, reflection, and social interaction. This is the accretion model of learning, illustrated on the right, where you are continuously updating and building on what is already known. Crucial to our vision, people are co constructing world models based on personal research in the context of attractors, quests or probes, and contributing that research to an epistemic community. Knowledge representation is crucial to all of this because how the computing system, the technical part of the socio-technical system builds on this. Um, we used a graph, and our graph is fundamentally a symbolic representation. Now we have many others, mostly numeric. One is neural nets, which is all the rage today, and we also have probabilistic, which is about to make a reemergence. Our focus is finding the right mix of all such mechanisms. We call that hybrid representations. We talk next about symbolic representations. They're called frames, and I'm going to turn the talk over to my colleague, Marc Antoine.
Thank you, Jack. I just before we get into frames, I just want to re-emphasize something. Uh, Maybe previous slide for a second. We care
Oh,
a lot about knowledge representation because if we're going to federate knowledge, we have to agree on how we represent knowledge so that we can share it about. And there's not going, like we said, there's not going to be one UX, one UI experience, or one truth, or one worldview. There's not going to be one way to represent knowledge. And given the diversity of people, skills, viewpoints, and so on, we have to accept the diversity of knowledge representation. On the other hand, so some of it will be numeric, some of it will be pure text, or even voice, who knows, and some of it will be structured information. However, at some point, we want the information to be auditable. Like we're having a conversation. What did you say? What did you mean? There's a precision that comes with structure. And the question is, what kind of structure? And the structure has to be not too rigid. So, because formal structure requires training, and not everybody has that training, but not too loose so that you get into hand wavy statements that are hard to pin down. So it's finding this balance between structure and or optional structure. You should be able to structure as much as you're able to, and then someone else can help make it more formal, more structured, more precise. Now, frames. Frames are a very old idea. Basically, a frame represents a situation with different actors playing certain roles. John gives a car to Mary. We have three actors, John, the car, and Mary. And so this comes from topic mapping. Topic mapping is basic at its origin. It's about identifying topics in knowledge, for example, in a text or in a knowledge object. And you're saying, okay, what are the concepts being referred to? It's the index at the back of the book, but it's also some of the topics are higher level topics. You know, in the index, there used to be this word or this phrase, and the phrase can get complex and it's still maybe worthy of indexing. Thinking works in hierarchies, and there's hierarchies of chunking, as Hofstadter would put it. And one key thing is that we think not only with entities, but with situations. In a situation, there's a relation between certain entities playing certain roles in that situation. And so that's the basic notion of relationship in topic maps. And the idea is the actor is a topic, the type of actor is a topic, the role is a topic, the relation type is a topic. So each and the relation has a provenance. So that's the theory of topic maps that we owe to Steve Newcomb, and that I personally owe to Jack Park introducing me to this while I was thinking about knowledge representation earlier. But this notion of frames, it has a long history. Next. It's used at different layers of knowledge. I said it's multi-layered. It's profoundly multi-layered. So Fillmore spoke about, I gave the example, John gives a car to Mary. That's a linguistic frame. Giving is a frame, and here's the actors. Minsky did a kind of knowledge representation, which he called frames. The word frame comes in many contexts. Lakoff spoke of metaphorical frames and how they're often embodied in the body, but he also went into the political framing. Douglas Walton wrote about argumentation schemas, and they're very much frames. And what is remarkable about Walton's description of argumentation frames is each frame has its defeaters. Like, oh, if someone is using this frame, this is the points that you need to check, or that could be used to defeat the frame. George Kelly, personal constructs. Maybe I should get Jack to talk more about this. Goffman speaks about the dramaturgic frame, how we're presenting ourselves in a certain context, which gives a context to how we speak and how we express ourselves. All these are layers of scenography, if you will, that enable us to communicate. We think using these more or less complex nested representations of situations. And the transitions between situations are also in that way situations. Next, please. And you can use this framework, if I dare say so, this frame way of describing things to represent causality, like cause and effect, are actor or roles, if you will. Epistemic evidence. This is evidence for that. Those are roles. Formal concept analysis. That's a totally different axis. It's more about saying, oh, this is distinct for that because of that distinguishing characteristic. And that's very useful when you're having an argument and people are stumbling on definitions. What is the distinguishing characteristics between the concepts, or what's the common abstraction? It's about making the concepts into a lattice. Next. So all of these are specialized constructs for different fields of knowledge. If you're doing causality, you're looking at, there's a whole field of analyzing causality relationship. And I don't think we need to say that knowledge sharing has to understand causality. I don't think we need to say that knowledge sharing has to understand formal concept analysis. But all of these ways of representing knowledge, we can represent them as frames, because the beauty of frames is, if we say there's a frame, it has subframes and superframes. So John gives a car to Mary. If Mary gives money to John, then those two small giving frame are part of the selling superframe. Or maybe Mary gives a contract to John, and this is part of the corruption superframe. It's any frame calls upon subframes and superframes implicitly. Some are potential, and they can be suggested, and some are part and parcel of what the frame's about. In selling, you have two giving subframes, which are necessary. And what is beautiful about that in terms of creating a federation is that we don't need to agree on all the frames. We don't need to have an agreed upon ontology or schema. People should be able to define new frames easily in terms of agreed upon subframes. So it should be very fluid in terms of being able to define new frames, but say, oh, this also includes these other frames which we do know what they mean. And that then it becomes possible to align on the meaning of new constructs, as which we may define ad hoc. So next, once we have these frames, it becomes much easier to transform fuzzy natural language and to propose, oh, do you mean this? And then propose it in the frame structure, which is a bit more structured, more rigorous. And when you have this more rigorous data, it becomes possible to compare it, becomes possible to compose, to build on it into bigger structures, which I think are necessary qualities for large-scale collective intelligence. If we want to be able to think as a group using verifiable concepts, and here I very much want to contrast with probabilistic or generative approaches, which you cannot check. There's no way to know why this knowledge came about. Next. But on the other hand, so you can anchor frames in natural language. You can say, look, these actors are identified in this piece of text. This whole piece of text represents a frame, and there's the subframe that you can find in the text. So you can anchor it, but you can also represent it using classic computer science schema languages, JSON schema, shackle, doesn't matter really. And the less formal frames should be more accessible to people without formal training. And here's a real role for symbolic AI. Symbolic AI can be used to do verifiable formal reasoning on the formal frames. So you can use the machines to do large-scale computations, but in a way that can be verified, unlike generative AI. But the real use of generative AI is it can help people translate the more formal frames to people who are not familiar with them into something more language-based. You can dialogue with the frames, or it can help people who don't have the training against to, okay, what you're trying to say, could it be this? And then help them formalize and help them to learn how to formalize. Again, not substituting for their reasoning, but assisting them and augmenting their capacity to reason in a group. And we really want to make reasoning around frames into a social practice that is more grounded than free-form argumentation with all the risks of misunderstanding because of the imprecision of natural language. And we're building, among other things, a game around teaching people structured conversation. Next. So this is really the project. We're trying to invite people to think of whatever their practice is in terms of how could it become part of a network of shared, not necessarily structured, but structuring conversation. So this is not going to be one formalization, one way of doing things, but can we have just enough agreement on ways to describe things so that we can start sharing them, cross-referencing, cross-pollinating between different formalisms? It's not linked data, it's linked ideas and linked justification, since we believe profoundly in justified knowledge and evidence-based knowledge. And from there, we can extract the meta level of trust metrics and experiment with trust metrics, but based on this ability to have this global conversation. So this is the invitation, and I hope we're both open to questions and anything you want us to be more precise about. Thank you. Yeah.
I would like to say something about this. I've been I can't Jack knows me. He knows I just can't stop thinking about this stuff, even though, I have other things to think about now. Uh this It seems to me that there's a fundamental thing in one of Jack's earliest slides. He mentions trust. And the thing that it seems to me we lack is any reason to believe that the person who says he's saying something is the person who's actually saying it. And I I really don't see I haven't seen frankly, until I heard Mark Carney's Davos speech, I didn't see any move. I haven't seen any move toward uh, exporting the rule of law, much less the export of trust. And so, um, it's just fundamental that we can tell who's speaking. Right now, we can't even tell if it's an LLM. So it's a big problem. Now, I'm thinking that if a bunch of smaller players that don't have any Silicon Valley types in them, like Brazil and Canada and whoever else is a so-called middle power, as Mark Carney said, um, they could all come together and explain um, how this thing is going to work, where we're going to have a rules-based order, and that means, for one thing, that if you make a deal, you can't welch secretly. And if you make a statement, you can't escape the fact that you made that statement. And you can't escape the harm that's done to your reputation or the enhancement thereof. And it seems to me that it's so fundamental to be able to tell that you're hearing from a human being and not an agent, that and you know who this human being is, that it seems to me all of this stuff actually can only follow that first step. And yeah, so Marc Antoine, go ahead.
Yeah, no. First, at full agreement. I've been thinking a lot about the impact of AI on society, and I've been using the model of Bellingcat about, he's saying basically democracy is based on verifiability, deliberation, and accountability. And there's a very fundamental way in which having black boxes breaks all three of those. And especially accountability is destroyed if you don't have integrity in data. And yesterday there was a very interesting conference. Bruce Schneier came to Montreal and he gave a very interesting conference. And he was saying, ARPANET was about trying to make a reliable network out of non-reliable parts. And Web 2.0 tried to make allow confidentiality, SSH layer, SSL layer, sorry, out of not necessarily confidential parts in a way. And now he's saying, can we build integrity without necessarily requiring integrity of the component parts? And that was an open question he raised. But he said integrity is at the core of what we need to be doing now. And there's been a lot of effort for having, for example, signed declaration, right? I've been able to sign things with PGP forever. Not that many people do it, but we find some social networks are thinking a lot about identity, like DOI, not DOI, sorry, the notion of personal identity and distributed identity. The ID, sorry, that's what I was looking for. It's interesting. I think it's going to be a frontier. And you're right. I remember a story I read ages ago where people would go on record with their predictions, and you'd have a kind of track record of making good predictions, and that would decide what reputation you had for leadership because you're able or not to have a track record of accurate predictions. I don't think it's enough to have accurate predictions. You also need personal integrity and agreement on goals, as well as whether a given action can predict those goals. But that's beyond. Still, it's an interesting metric among others. It's an interesting trust metrics around others. But you cannot have that without, at some point, some kind of identity. Sorry, I'm going on and on. Basic agreement. How can we build this? The IDs are part of the solution. They're not the whole solution. It's open research. But I think that also when people do prediction accuracy, a big deal is that really what you predicted? Does that follow the criteria of your prediction? And this is about precision, and being able to be precise about terms also matters. And that's what we're trying to work on, the ability to go from fuzzy language to more precise logic. Over. I don't know.
David had his
Yes.
hand up. I don't
Yes,
know
absolutely,
if
absolutely.
he may have had to step away. I do want to make a comment that I put in my talk this thing called strong authentication. And if you go back to Wikipedia in the early days, they didn't require authentication, which caused no end of mayhem from people that would just come in and mess up pages. And when they finally got sued for liability, they went to authentication. Not very strong, but they went. But take X for example, where all you have to do is sign in. You don't give them a credit card. It's flooded with bots. We can't have that in a federation, so we need mechanisms for proving you're not a bot. And I think that that's key to both trust, and I didn't mention it, but safety. David, you
Yeah.
had your hand up.
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to reinforce the point that Steve's brought up, and you and Marc Antoine have both also spoke to it as well. I actually think it's even a bigger problem than just AI, because even before AI had such an amazing, crazy emergence into the scene, as agents, et cetera, and bots, we still had a fake accounts problem. I mean, Facebook has been taking down 6 billion fake accounts per year. So it's a huge problem. And um, the way we've been thinking about constructing Canopy, it would essentially have a federated strong authentication. Uh, it would also allow communities to say what kinds of authentication they require. So they might say, well, we're okay with OAuth, or maybe they would say, we actually want a true strong authentication. So it's Mastodon or app protocol or one of these other protocols like Nostr that has strong authentication. Beyond strong authentication, though, because that doesn't actually help you have any understanding of whether that's actually a person or a um, unique person. My thought is that there are some communities and applications that actually want to know that the person that they're dealing with is a unique human and that that person doesn't have any other accounts that are contributing to virality or reputation boost. Um,
Deduplication.
yeah, exactly. And that's what and the way we've been thinking about it, just because there's no one identity solution. I mean, we just can't, there's just not going to happen that way. I mean, people and communities want to authenticate in different ways. So the way I've been thinking about it is, well, community could opt in to requiring proof of unique humanity. Of course, we want that to be decentralized. Uh, they could opt into that and make it a requirement for participating in rewards, virality, and reputation boost. And if someone comes in to the community and they have not gone through a proof of unique humanity, well, first of all, it depends on the community. Some communities might just say, well, no, you can't even come in, you can't see, etc. if you haven't done that. Other ones might say, well, you can come in and you can see what we're doing, but if you hit the like button, it's not going to affect the algorithms because you have not gone through the process to let us know that you are in fact a unique human, and therefore we're not gonna allow you to affect our virality. So anyway, I think it's a really rich subject, and I'm really glad that Steve brought it up.
It's really hard. The way I look at it is every human being, well, let's make a distinction between the human animal, which we absolutely can uniquely identify, and the emergent property of a human animal, which is what I call a human being. Um, and it seems to me that it's good to get a, a a really meta perspective on all this, in that um, everything that has developed complexity is emergent. You know, the I don't know quite how to put this, but um, all of life comes from simpler life, and we don't even know what the original life looked like. We can guess, look something like an archaea, but you know, it was and so human beings have this ability to have uh, this emergent property, which is maybe not so different from what other animals have, but it is different in that from one generation to the next, each generation can inherit the whole culture. So it seems to me uh, that the emergent property of human beings writ large is human culture. Somebody wrote me the other day saying, you know, quoting Yuval Harari about the nastiness of AI and how it's just, going to do terrible things to everybody and destroy everything and so on and so forth. I found it a little shrill, and I had to I had to respond that how do you know that the creator didn't intend for human culture to be the thing from which the next iteration of whatever it is that's being emerged, of emergence, the next generation of emergence isn't AI. How do we know that? Well, we don't. And how we react to that, I mean, we could be very I'm sorry, I'm off topic, but it seems to me that it's good to look at this big picture in order to understand how crucial it is for us to be sure that the person we're we're following is indeed a human being and a unique human being, and not a multiple, uh, not just part of a human being, but the whole thing, the one and only. And it seems to me that, if we can do that if we can identify human beings individually with, let's face it, DNA, then it should be possible to do this in a networked situation. I mean, what's so hard about this? I mean, it seems to me it's technology that we know it's not cheap yet, but it could be. I mean, think of what a cell phone is now. My God. So
Yes.
I'm sorry.
I'm wondering if I could just change the subject a little bit here. I'm gonna have to go before too long. But so I work with thousands and thousands of social change networks, social transformation networks around the world. And in these networks, identity, and maybe someday it will be a problem. It is not a problem. People know each other. They interact on Zoom or face to face, and they're dealing with, co-creating a world that's good for all of us. And I mean, there are hundreds of thousands of these out there, and I'm, you know, slightly in touch with a bunch of them because I'm like the grandmother of this, but our issue is that these networks out there are not connected to each other, and they are creating so many fabulous things that, really, if we had ways to collect that knowledge and keep refining it and adapting it to different settings, the world would be transformed in a pretty short period of time, and we wouldn't have to maybe worry so much about some of these other things. All I'm saying, there's a huge playing field where we really, at this point, don't have to deal with issues of identity. We have to deal with the very, very crucial need for how do we help people learn, discover what they figured out. They're innovating all the time and they don't even realize it. We're trying to develop roles like knowledge weavers and things like that. But the protocol of how we actually, what kind of processes, very concrete micro processes that we help people be more reflective, more aware, learn from what they're doing, be able to document that, translate it into, protocols and practices that other people can adapt, yes, but learn from. And then build these networks that allow the spread to happen really rapidly. So, I just like, I'm wanting to know, like, okay, you have, this stuff that you're talking about, but how is it concretely that we're going to be able to help, people in India who've been working on, certain kinds of water systems, interacting with folks in, African villages and really begin to figure out the social aspects of really getting clean water to, many thousands more people.
David, Denise,
Who's
and
running
Jeff,
this
if
show? Both three of the guys who are running the show have their hands up. Who's going to call on them?
well, the Zoom gives us order, so go ahead, David.
Yeah.
Oh, am I first? Okay. Oh, well, June, what you just said was music to my ears. I'm coming from that social, we call it regeneration now, but
Yeah, yeah.
from that regenerative space, I've been working on that more or less for over two decades. I started out with the peak oil relocalization movement, and we were talking about local food, local water, local energy, local currencies, etc. So this is the world that I come from, and I've been building this tool Canopy, which I think that will be in beta Q1 or Q2, that is set up to enable communities to essentially have their own layer on top of the web. So when they go to a web page, they can, if they choose to be visible, they can see all the people in their regenerative community that are either at the page at that same time, have been there, or they can see traces of notes that they have left on that page, either just connected to the page
Mm,
or connected to pieces of information on the page. And the whole idea is really to move past, this attention-based environment to one that's really around knowledge building. So yeah, look forward to connecting
okay.
for sure.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'm not going to promise prototype soon. I'm involved in many projects. Matt is still here. I'm working on discourse graphs, which is more aimed at the scientific community, but we're looking very much at sharing knowledge between scientists, one piece of evidence at a time. So that's very much on our agenda. I would contend, I'll just want to, I totally agree. This is the real question: how to share knowledge, ideas, practices, transmission of good practices, how to identify relevant practices. That's totally what it's about. Governance for me is a big part of it. Um there's the underground work and there's the power dynamics, and this is why I care so much about the definition of democracy. But it is an identity problem also. Not personal identity, idea identity, concept identity. Is that project the same as this one? No, it isn't. Obviously not. What is common? What are the
Yeah,
important
yeah.
points of comparison? What lessons can I bring? Uh, is what is the important part that's the same, and the
Yeah,
unimportant
yeah.
part, or what is the local part that's specific and needs to
Uh-huh.
be
Uh-huh.
uh, rejigged for a specific situation, while keeping in view of the common abstraction where learnings can be shared and transmitted. So for me, concept identity is actually very central to
Mm,
having these network of cooperation. And yes, sharing concepts is absolutely fundamental, but the whole notion of, is it the same concept? Is there a distinction? What's the evolution of the concept? It was the same concept at one moment. Oh, they evolved in that direction. Is it still the same concept? It matters, because if it evolved, it's because they learned something. uh, for me, this notion of, if you have a social network of ideas, you have a social network of ideas that live and die, multiply, and merge. And that is part of what is important to have this global conversation. So I just wanted to, why am I in this philosophy? Because I think it's relevant to what you're doing. Over. Jack.
And I just want to endorse what June said. The idea of taking these local and hyper-local conversations where people know each other, trust each other, they create local safe environments and they do their work, etc. The question that you're asking is, how do you scale that up to the global level so that we can learn from each other? And I made the bold claim in my talk that federation is the mechanism by whatever means. And Mark Pearson has his hand up, so I'm not going to go any further except to say he's appears to be doing things similar to what you're doing, June. And I'm desperate to figure out how to federate his work. Over.
You're muted, Mark.
That may be a blessing. Let me just add one more thing here, and then I'll give you camping. So sorry for the delay, and I'll just put this in there so you have something if the way I speak makes no sense. Um, Here you go. So I think the thing I could say very, very quickly that at least gestures toward pretty much everything I've heard is the shortest possible introduction to what we're up to. One idea. The idea is that people can see the systems that they're already in. 1 million neighborhoods, which is the entire planet, via campfire conversations and cave drawings. And those are not separate entities. The campfire conversation and the cave drawing is one thing, one event, and it is ongoing, and it is conversations that build causal loop diagrams that are shared and are familiar and are vernacular and are definitely not technical. And that these diagrams continue to build and morph, and people come to understand each other and the words they're using and the concepts they're using only in conversations where they're pointing at actual artifacts on an actual wall and saying, but I thought
Mhm.
you meant something else. Now that I hear you say that for the third time in the fourth context, I finally see what you mean. And this is what Mary Parker Follett is talking about when she's talking about the only possibility for democracy has to be born in neighborhoods in deliberative conversations. So that's as quick as I can gesture toward what we're up to, but we're actually working in very limited number of neighborhoods. We don't want any more neighborhoods because we don't know what we're doing. And we're trying to learn with very successful, very active neighborhood developers in communities that have neighborhood development centers that are not owned by government, not owned by a foundation, that are actually of the community. So we're very particular who we'll work with because it's so easy to get lost in this journey, and we don't want to get lost because we're too old. If we get lost, nothing happens.
So, Mark, can you tell me a little bit about how the interaction within one of these neighborhood applications would work? Just an example use case would be really interesting.
Well, I mean, I'll just give you particular examples. Down in Superior, Arizona, Chris Casillas had they bought this place, it was an old meat market, and turned it into a community. In our limited experience, we find people who've gone out, been very successful in business, realized that wasn't what they wanted to do with their life, but they had skills and money, move back into their very stressed neighborhoods. We only work with stressed neighborhoods because they're the only people that aren't so satisfied that they'll actually take risks. Everything I say is an overstatement, so you'll have to denude it of the overstatement. Anyway, so he found me because I had my phone number out on some talk I'd given about the viable system model, Stafford Beer's work. So we've been working together for 4 years after that. And it was clear that his board had only had one board meeting, um, and that there was conflict. So Carrie Turner, my partner, who took systems dynamics modeling from MIT to Europe and made a 40-year career out of it as a consultant, um, taught Chris how to do causal diagramming in a group. This is all on record. It's all recorded, So he then did that with his board, and everything that they've done since then came out of that diagram, and they refer back to it regularly and update it.
Mhm.
So for the first time, the conflict, he did have to get his dad off the board, okay? But other than that, the conflict in the board was all dealt with by pointing and talking and saying, well, what about that? And then they could easily, once they had a shared diagram that they created in their terminologies, we didn't touch it. That was the point. We're not going to be your consultants. We're going to teach you to be your own facilitator. And and the things they're doing down there are unbelievable. You can contact me. You can go, look up, Chris Casillas, Leo's, Regen Sonora. It's just amazing. And then the people we're working with in East Lansing have been at it for 10, 12 years, created over 800 new businesses in a very stressed neighborhood where a lot of these businesses are created by ex-convicts. And uh, and that's where we're doing a lot of the technical stuff, getting rid of blockchain, getting rid of Ethereum, bringing in Hay. I mean, just doing a lot of really crazy stuff, but all on the ground with real people who need money, who, just got out of prison, just got out of the hospital. It's just, there's nothing theoretical going on. The theory is all in support of actual people who have real life-threatening problems in front of them.
800 new businesses in one neighborhood that's
In 11 years.
mind-blowing.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, so what? That's still
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, 1,200, and they're 800 still. Now, keep in mind, these are
What?
not meant to become global. They're not meant to replace Alphabet. They're actually things where people make stuff and other people buy it.
Well, that's incredible. I mean, 2/3 success rate is unheard of. I would think that new businesses would be more like 10%. What is Rondinhay? I've never heard of that. I have no idea even how to spell it or what it is.
I'll give you the link. Rondon Hay there's a company called the Haier Group, Haier. It's one of the fastest growing business types and businesses in the world. In 2017, they bought GE Appliance. Okay. And this is the most hair-raising thing I'll tell you. In 2012 or 14, I can't remember, they went from a pretty big multinational company in the morning, a single company, to, I forget the numbers because it's changed so many times since then, but they went to, by the end of that day, I think, I forget, a couple of thousand companies in one day with zero middle managers. And they've continued to build on that. So the company size, every company size is 5 to 15 people. And it's a multinational company. And I studied this, took some courses, studied this for 6 months, and I'll tell you, the miraculous thing they did was created technology, in their case, built on Ethereum and smart contracts, but they replaced hierarchy. We needed hierarchy when we didn't have electronic communication. And you lost a lot because of the constrictions of hierarchy. But one thing you could do is you could get a Roman legion out there on the battlefield. But, that's not the world we live in. So now with technology, and we're replacing Ethereum, and, we're not a fan of using blockchain, and at the neighborhood level, we don't need it. So we're replacing all that stuff. But what we're doing is creating it so each of these groups of 5 to 15 interact with other groups of 5 to 15 through smart contracts where the economics are resolved instantaneously at the point of sale. But I'll go grab the things and give them to you. And keep in mind, my stuff is for me and my close friends. I'm not trying to be famous or even understandable for people who don't know me. So, but I'll give you the two links. And these are whole websites that, my friends, my associates work with. But Rondinhay will blow your mind because you no longer need hierarchical institutions. Oh, that's not the one I want to put in there. You grab this right here. You no longer need, and whoever can pull this off will beat the other ones because you don't have the infrastructure cost and you have much quicker communication. And so that's where my big idea is civil society can use Rond and Hay, and you can have local businesses that can actually outcompete against Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, we've got a local instance of Amazon running there. It's not Amazon, it's all on proprietary software, open source, but not. Anyway, I'm trying to say too much at once. Let me get you the contract one and then I'll shut up. So yeah, I don't know how to interact with anyone who's not a close associate because it has to evolve in a lot of conversations for anything I'm pointing at, gesturing toward to make any sense at all. So, at the risk of already having said too much, I'll shut up.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it. I'll take a look at it. Looks really interesting.
I
Well,
must say, this talk brought together some really, really astute minds. And it's a little bit like going to a conference and sitting in a room listening to talks, but the real action is out in the aisles or the coffee table after the talks when people actually start gabbing. And this conversation, the gabbing that's going on here is um to
awesome. Well, if
Steve?
go ahead, Mark Antoine.
No, Steve. Steve has his hands up.
Oh, I just wanted, am I on? Yes. Um, God, now I've scared myself out of what I was going to say. Oh, yes. The uh, I think you can do two things about community. You can either stay small and have trust, or not and not. And so I still, my dreams are beyond control, and I I I feel like you know we really need to have very large trust, very large trust between a very large numbers of people. And I all I have to do is point to our current president. You can understand why that's so. And it seems to me that the identity problem goes to the heart of the voting problem, as Jack earlier alluded. So if we have gold standard identity for human beings, it solves an awful lot of problems, and they don't get solved without it. That's all. I'm sorry I keep harping on that, but it seems to me extremely dramatic. It's just very, very impossible to ignore. Done.
I agree with you, Steve, and the presentations have been outstanding. This is Suzanne Sakevich. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think the meta layer, the initiative, is going to solve so many problems, bringing together the knowledge of systems, and where they span across all multi numerous disciplines and theoretical frameworks in academia and industry. So I'm working with NASA folks right now and NASA on this. This model is the solution for, well, this is the architecture for a model that was presented this morning, and I just left that meeting and came over here, and I just linked this initiative, this project, and all the great work you all are doing here with its need. And so I sent an email just now trying to get permission. But if and I'll put this in the chat because this paper is published. This paper, this is the doctor that is he's written a thesis, right, and proposed it to NASA, and they're going to fund it. But it's about orchestrating symbiotic foundational technologies for humans, robotics, and autonomous systems, and exploring a framework for this. And this meta layer initiative is the solution. And it's about being able to communicate systems of biology, systems of engineering, systems across every single field. And they figured it out. And the meta layer for the model, but the meta layer is the architecture that is needed. So I can't believe I don't think any of you know any of those that I'm talking with right now. But if there's anything I could do to support you and your projects, I I think I have an outstanding solution. So I'll put in the chat the name of this paper, and you're all. It's on a space systems level for, but isn't that where we're all going, right? Low, communications have to take place up there for it to go better down here using the multi-level web approach. So I'll put that in the chat. But I see a symbiosis in this very existence of this meeting today, and I think we could be onto something really great. That's it.
So I'd like to follow Steve. I consider him a dear friend.
Mutual.
He and Mark have it right. You need hyperlocal, highly trusted communities. And all I'm really concerned with is how do I connect them without interfering with them? Think of each hyperlocal community as its own silo, for God's sake. But it's a silo that is willing to share in a public way, a cultural way, what they are uncovering for the benefit of others. And that's why I talk about what I call knowledge federation. Thank you, Steve. Marc-Antoine?
Yeah, very quickly. I said it in the chat, but I do want to emphasize this. Personal trust is limited, but trust in processes can grow beyond small scale. And I agree with Mark, there is a layer that only exists at the personal level. There's a layer of transmission that only exists at a personal level. And we've been able to build science, which is a very large scale institution based on trust, not in individual discoveries, not in individual claims of papers, but in the process of self-correction. How do you build trust out of non-trustworthy parts? And I think processes matter. And this is why I'm so interested in making clear whatever chain of reasoning, whatever chain of evidence behind any decision, and making that ultra transparent. Because we can also learn at another scale from that. So, I mean, that was also more to answer Steve. But again, I agree. There is something that happens purely at the local level, and there is something else that happens at the collective level. Over.
Shared control.
In my fantasies, there is a kind of So you have multiple communities. I always thought of a community as indistinguishable from a universe of discourse. And there are some individuals who are trusted in multiple universes of discourse. And if a person is credentialed and reputable in more than one universe of discourse, then they're in a position to provide um, federating services, to allow people who speak in one universe of discourse to address the people in another universe of discourse by virtue of the translation that is, how shall I put it, authorized by a person who's trusted in both communities. And so it seems that those people who are like tour guides or translators or just, you know, polymaths maybe, uh, are at a different hierarchical level, but only for the purpose of allowing federation, not for the purpose of making any um, decisions or, having any serious authority. They're just to get you from A to B. I used to think of federation as a question, as a matter of bridge building. And the problem with federation of multiple universes of discourse is they're in motion. They're all in motion. And when you try to build a bridge to something that's in motion, it's really a big problem. And if you're trying to build a bridge between things that are both in motion, that's an even bigger problem. So I don't know exactly how to do that, but it does seem to me that a person, a human being, must be the locus of the construction of such bridges. It can't be anything else. And of course, process and procedures, as the scientific enterprise is, I would say that what we have there is a situation where we have multiple universes of discourse and they're all in motion. But we have people who are trusted in multiple universes of discourse, and we know who they are. And that's why it works. And it can't work without that. And in the more humdrum quotidian world, we have people called journalists who try to do this work. But it's not it's not simple. And you have to have identity. Sorry, done.
Journalists used to, unfortunately. I see what you're saying. You're right. People are at the center, and yet community of humans can build bridges too. There needs to be prominent uh, translators, and there's a micro work of weaving concept and aligning concepts that can be collective. Over, but I know Mark wanted to speak. Sorry.
No, not a lot, but I think that Jack brought out a lot of things at the beginning of his talk. And um, what we need is to be able to put these concepts out there and talk about them and point at them. Um, and that's really not about a computer. The computer is just a fancy cave drawing, a cave wall for the drawings. And I'm not in the least skeptical about the possibility of doing this. Uh, I'm not, yeah, people will trust each other if they can repeatedly point at something and from the reaction, physical, verbal, over time reaction, can say, oh, yes, that is what I agree, not by opening a dictionary, but by having the meaning coming from the totality of the behavior of the people and the people in the room, then things become trustworthy, not because it's a decision, because it's an experience that they are trustworthy. They keep showing up the way you've come to think they are. But it is conversational. And I don't think it's a good idea to trust disembodied voices.
I'm tempted to agree. I think it's important that trust is rooted and embodied. And one of the examples that inspired me is the Change My Mind community experiment. I think it was was it Reddit or Tumblr? I don't remember. It was a community where people would come with, oh, I believe this, but I'm curious, change my mind. And people would come with stories. And of course, we don't know how much of that was propaganda or whatever. But in a way, what mattered was there was a practice of rewarding people when you were moved by what they had to say. Or you're, okay, that makes me reconsider. That makes me think about this in a different way. So that was a disembodied voice. Uh, we have the experience of literature changing societies. Literature is about a very embodied voice, someone's voice trying to embody many other voices and giving them a window into a human experience. And it is shown that reading more literature makes you more empathetic because it makes you more familiar with inner processes of other humans. That's empirical. I believe in embodiment, but I also believe the embodiment can be transmitted beyond the individual experience sometimes. But yes, it has to be rooted, and yet it can go beyond. It's two-faced.
So I'd like to draw this to a close by saying that I am extraordinarily grateful to David for inviting me and then Marc Antoine to come and share our worldviews. And I'm really, really grateful for the crowd and the questions they asked and the commentary that they offered and what they put in the chat room. For me, today was richly rewarding. I hope it was for others. Thank you all.
Great, Jack.
Thank you, Jack and Marc Antoine, for this really thought-provoking conversation that you have sparked. And I'm hoping that the wide variety of people that we have here, all this knowledge that we can build upon that. I put a link in the chat. It's rfcthemetallayer.org. It's probably 20 messages above. But the point here is that as a community, we're looking to build the standards for this meta layer or meta level or coordination layer or civic layer or trust layer, whatever you want to call it. We're wanting to come together as a community to build the standards because, quite frankly, none of the other standards bodies are doing it. Not IETF, not W3C, not the DID Foundation, not the Web3 Foundation.
There's
None
no
of them are
money in it.
myopically focused on the interface like we are. Was someone about to say
Sorry, I
something?
interrupted you. I was just saying there's no money in it. You know, the problem is that we have, I mean, we're speaking now from years of frustration. The basic problem is if it's not a business model, it won't happen.
Well, I personally believe that there are as many business models in the web as many as we have in the web today, there'll be 10 times as many in the space above the web. I believe that the value created when you speak to not only not monetary value, but also things that we don't capture, like making better decisions and avoiding scams and all those. I think that when we fully allow this space above the web to evolve into what it wants to be, that it will be 100 times the value created of today's web. And the key thing is that we don't allow it to be captured. And that's why it's so hard for us to start it right now, because generally what happens is these large companies come in and they define all the protocols, all the standards and everything, and they define them in a way that allows for full capture. Now, if we do that, if we do allow that for the space above the web page, for the meta level, then we're cooked. I mean, it's just done and over. But if we can maintain human centeredness and personal, individual, and community sovereignty in the space above the web page and allow enterprise as well. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a huge role for that for enterprises to make plenty of money, but we need to be able to structure it and set the rules, which we can if we're creating a new environment. We need to be able to set those rules so that they're not actually taking advantage and exploiting people like they are
by
in
the
today's
Bamberg
web.
Mathematical Consciousness Science Initiative.
Sorry. Uh-oh.
What?
No, that I clicked on one of the links here, and it's YouTube trying to come into my. Oh my god! Sorry, you guys. I clicked on the link just to minimize it so I could like watch it later. How do I turn it off? Oh my god! Sorry. Oh, how unprofessional. I am.
Just
Sorry,
just
Debbie.
mute yourself, Suzanne.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's a good idea. Oh,
And
sorry.
Mark has his hand up now.
Yeah, David, just listening to you, I mean, I didn't know that that was, a thing that you were interested in. You wanted me to come speak here. I'll try to get out of it by saying we ought to invite uh, Zach Babb to come and speak here because what you've just described actually exists and not well known, and created by a genius guy over the last 9 years for the same reasons that you want it. And we're implementing it in East Lansing. So we ought to have him come and explain the open source technology you can use to do what you just said um, anytime you want. And Zach Babb is the guy, and it's called Planet Nine. If you go to GitHub and search on Planet Nine, you can go read about it and even use the software if you want. But I think it's not all ready for prime time, but I think with this group, if I've got the feeling for this group, you're interested in things that are emerging, not that are just already done deals. So I would say we ought to get Zach Babb here. Yeah, that's right. Planet Nine, Nine, one word. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that there's definitely interest in what you're doing, and there's interest in what Zach is doing as well. So let's do both. If you could connect me with Zach, that would be great. I've got your email, so I'll just go ahead and shoot you an email after this session, and we
Yeah.
can talk
And
about when.
and has this been recorded? Because if it has, I'll give it to, if you
It,
can make.
it it has been recorded and it will come online. And by the way, Zach independently reinvented Ted Nelson. He has so
Mm.
many of the elements of Ted Nelson. For those of you who don't know it, Ted Nelson goes all the way back to the late 50s and early 60s. He's the guy that coined the term hypertext. He was a brilliant mind. He was he operated in the same space that Doug Engelbart did, and they over time became very good friends. So Ted Nelson is another important name and research topic for those who are curious. You'll find Ted Nelson all over YouTube.
Absolutely.
So many
All
to
right.
learn from.
Yeah, absolutely.
Network the networkers. We need to network the networkers. There's so much intelligence, so much being done in that space, and I find so many people don't know of one another in that space. It's sad, given we all want to connect people, and we need to be better at connecting one another.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the work of Douglas Engelbart and Ted Nelson, also Teilhard de Chardin, uh, they're so relevant for our time right now. Right now, we need that, but we seem to have forgotten these people and these ideas, and it's crazy to me.
Quite. Okay,
All
folks.
right. Well, thanks so much, everyone. Really
Thank you
appreciate
all.
it.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks a
Bye.
lot. And thanks.